Okay, this is video B of Freud, video 4B of Freud. It's an overview of Freud and the psychoanalytical theory. I'm just going to say this. The psychoanalytical theory was the first force, and you remember the second and third force. I hope you keep those in mind because we will be looking at those a little bit later on. Read the biography of Freud, his home life, his relationship with his mother. His mother was quite a bit younger than his father. His mother took care of Freud, really kind of pampered Freud in a way. They realized that he was gifted, and so everything was provided for Freud, and the rest of the children somewhat were, I don't want to say neglected, but Freud was given precedence over the rest of the children. Okay, the greatest need, according to Freud, and it starts with an S, and so often we say, oh, that's sex. No, it really wasn't sex. Freud said that the greatest need is to strive, to accomplish, to become involved in one's own life, to do as well as they possibly can do. That was the greatest need. Now, the two focal points of Freud is sex and aggression. So you say, well, instead of watching Freud, why don't I just watch a TV program? Because they're full of sex and aggression. And you might have a good thought there. I don't know for sure. But anyway, sex and aggression had a little bit different meaning as far as Freud was concerned. Sex, according to Freud, was life, wanting to live. And aggression more or less looked at the negative side of living, which is a word that's called thanatos, wanting to die. But anyway, let's look at sex and aggression. The reason that you are taking this class now is because you are aggressive. If you didn't want to take this class, badly enough anyway, I'm not saying that you wanted to take this class. You could have avoided this class, but you were aggressive. You want to take this class because it applies to your graduation, and so you have to show a certain amount of aggression. In most of what we do, we have to exhibit a form of aggression. And so aggression is not always a negative term. It can be a positive term. Individual wants to run faster. They can show aggression. Individual wants to lift more weights. They can put more weight on the bar. That shows aggression. So the point that I want to bring across here is that sex is equated with life and doing the positive things, and aggression in some instances could be equated to motivation. And so aggression is not always negative. Now, Freud had three levels of mental life. He had the conscious, the preconscious, and the unconscious. Three levels of mental life. I'm going to emphasize that. Now, the unconscious, we are not aware of. This material has been put into our unconscious through the interaction with environment, and for some reason it is stuffed deeply inside of our unconscious. And according to Freud, it takes a great deal of therapy, it takes a great deal of talk to uncover this unconscious. The material just isn't readily available. Then we have the preconscious. The preconscious could be equated to the part of the mind that you probably know it, but you're going to have to think about it. You know, it's like taking a test. Oh, I know the answer to that test, but you think about it. And through thinking about it, the answer becomes available to you, becomes obvious to you. The conscious is what we are always aware of. You are watching this video now. I'm making this video. We are aware of this. We don't have to dig down in our pre-conscious and pull this up. Now, there'll be some items that I ask you in assignments where you may remember. And then there may be some where you'll have to employ the pre-conscious. So that's the levels of mental life that we're talking about. The unconscious is what at times got Freud into a little bit of a problem, but we won't go to that. Then we have the provinces of the mind. And this is the id, the ego, and the superego. Now, we all have an id. We have the same id that we were born with. It says provinces of the mind. I could say forces of the mind. We could use various terms here. But the id likes pleasure. The id cannot stand tension. Blinking your eyes could be part of the id because you don't have tension there. If you don't blink your eyes, they're going to become sore. And so the id does not care for tension, and it seeks pleasure. Now the id, and this is an important concept here that helps us a little bit later on in some of our studies with Freud. The id cannot interact with the outside world. Okay. Then we have the ego. The ego begins, some individuals say, we are born with an ego. Some say the ego develops at 18 months, year and a half. And the ego can go inside of the mind, but it can also interact with the environment. Remember, the id cannot interact with the environment. It cannot go outside of the mind. The ego can. The ego is kind of a reality. It brings realism to the situation. About the age of 6, a superego is developed. Now, that is an ego ideal, doing things properly in the way they should be, and it's also our conscious. Now, an example of this would be, we'll say that an individual is in the grocery store. We'll say a youngster is in the grocery store. And the youngster becomes very hungry and wants something to eat. Well, this could be equated to the id. Now, the id cannot stand tension. It wants immediate gratification. I want it right now. And so it doesn't make any difference when the id is hungry. A piece of wood would work. But we have the ego there going between the inner mind and between the environment. I hope you're following along with this. But the youngster's in the grocery store. The youngster is hungry. The id is saying, I need something to eat. I want pleasure. I can't stand tension. So what happens is the ego comes along and says, hey, id, I know what to do. There's a candy bar here. All we have to do is take the wrapper off that candy bar, take a bite of that candy bar, and then your hunger will be satisfied. So it acts as a referee. But then the superego is playing in this now. Remember, the superego is developed at about the age of 6. And so the superego comes into play. And the superego says, hey, you just can't take a candy bar, take the wrapper off of it, and eat it. You have to pay for that. Because if you don't pay for it, that is stealing, and I'm your conscious, and you can't steal. So that is an example of the id, ego, and superego. And I will see you on video 4 about Freud, Section C. Until then, have a good day.